Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to our December NCR Research and Innovation Seminar. As you know, we'll be doing these roughly monthly, and we have a great speaker today and a new Virginia Tech person who's joined us very recently, I guess in June or July. September. And I think when you hear, many of you I think already know Sallie, but for those of you who don't, I think when you hear her bio, you will be really amazed and really excited that we were able to capture her and bring her to Virginia Tech. So the seminar will be, I think, about, Sallie, you've got about, what, 45 minutes or so? About 45 minutes, we'll have some question and answer time, and then we'll have a reception, which is doubling as our NCR monthly social. So there's opportunity for obviously discussion during the seminar, and then plenty of opportunity to interact informally, and as well as with Sallie, as well as your colleagues and students. So let me introduce our speaker. I'm very, very happy to have Sallie talk to us today. She is the director and professor of statistics of the Social and Decision Analytics Laboratory, which is an element of the Virginia Bioinformatics Institute. She was previously a professor of statistics and the vice president for academic affairs and provost at Waterloo in Canada. Prior to that, she was the director of the Science and Technology Policy Institute for the Institute of Defense Analysis located in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, she was the Dean of Engineering and a professor of statistics at Rice University. She's been a lead of the Statistical Sciences Group at Los Alamos National Laboratory. She's been a professor and director of graduate studies at Kansas State University. And she's also been a program director in the statistics area at National Science Foundation. So just amazing background. Her areas of interest are uncertainty quantification, computation and graphical statistics, software and modeling techniques, data access and confidentiality issues. She's a National Associate of the National Academy of Sciences, a fellow of the American Association of Advancement of Science, an elected member of the International Statistics Institute, and a member of the JASON's advisory group, which if any of you know, that is a very impressive credential indeed, a very, very select group of advisors to the Department of Defense. She's a fellow and past president of the American Statistical Association. She has a PhD in statistics from the Iowa State University, and I'm very, very pleased to introduce our speaker, Sallie Keller. Please join me. You can clip it on.
Okay. Sanjay, thank you. So as you can tell, I don't let grass grow under my feet, apparently. But I have had a wide range of experiences, and what's very exciting to me is that I took a sort of a foray into academic administration, being a dean of engineering and leading a policy institute here in Washington, and then provost at University of Waterloo. And now I'm really excited to relaunch myself back into the research space and I've been given a great opportunity to build a new capability for Virginia Tech. And actually, it's a new capability, I think, that will be very useful for the country and beyond. And it happens to be the Social and Decision Analytics Lab. And what I want to do today is to tell you a little bit about what this lab will be, what this lab is becoming, because we have gotten started. We're 2 months old, 3 months old, September, October, November. We're 3 months old. And you'll get a sense of the range of problems that we really want to try to address, and the type of people that we'll be bringing together. And for those of you in the room that either have students, are students, thinking of prospective students, we are on the lookout for students. So if any of this captures your imagination, please come and talk to us. All right, so the Social and Decision Analytics Lab. We are part of the Virginia Bioinformatics Institute, and you may wonder why that makes any sense. And it makes sense because the science director, the chief scientist for the Institute, Chris Barrett, he's put forth a really grand vision for the Bioinformatics Institute at Virginia Tech, which really sets it apart from many others. And it's the vision of information biology, which what he would like to see us achieve is to be able to vertically move from the molecular, social biological interactions all the way through social phenomena. My new lab is on the social phenomena end of this, but we work all the way through this, and we collaborate across Virginia Tech and beyond. The other thing that is really exciting to me, having spent time at a national lab in particular, and being a huge believer in team science and now what is becoming transdisciplinary team science, that is just at the heart and soul of the mantra of the Bioinformatics Institute here at Virginia Tech. And so we get to instill that and embrace that in our new lab. Okay, so what are we going to do? We will focus on social issues that are looking at this sort of integrated human habitat, health, and well-being. We want to really infuse statistical properties and analyses into this. We want to embrace big data. We will leverage the fabulous high-performance computing assets that live here at Virginia Tech and beyond, as well as the incredible complex systems and complex systems modeling. By our very nature, and who are we, the lab will be a collection of statistical scientists and computational social scientists. And just by the nature of our fields, that means that we'll adopt a system-level thinking in the problems that we look at. And I think most importantly, what we want to do is to help create an evidence base that would affect social policy decisions. And when I say social policy, I'm not simply talking about political policy. I'm talking about social decisions that affect our every life and the way that we live. For example, these are some really big questions that we want to address. What is the well-being of a community or a society? That's a huge question. And first of all, how do you measure it? What is it that you're trying to measure? Are you trying to measure economic change? Are you trying to measure the impact of education? What are the features that you're trying to measure? People haven't really defined all that yet, but we want to be in the middle of trying to define these sorts of things. When we think about what creates innovation, one thing that seems pretty clear is that a healthy population will be an innovative population, will be individuals who will be able to really work innovatively. So what's the connection with public health and innovation? It's a question that we'd like to study. How do we evolve the livability of our cities? A lot of discussion about resiliency. That's captured in there. But the livability of our cities as they go through major shocks, and not just shocks that are natural disasters or man-made disasters. Well, I guess this is a man-made disaster, economic collapse or a government shutdown, but not just terrorist disasters. But these other kinds of shocks to the systems. Not just global warming, but beyond global warming. How do we try to think about these things? How do we have a robust military? What are the economic consequences of an educated society? Today, the news came out on PISA. Is that the right name for it? From the National Center for Educational Statistics, and what they have determined that now since 2003, there's been absolutely no change in the test scores and what would be the measure of mathematical and science ability of our students, of our children. We're dropping as a country. So why is this? Yet there are pockets in the country, Massachusetts was brought out as an example today, that actually has accelerated while the rest of the country has stayed flat for now a decade. And that's a little disturbing. Well, we will immerse ourselves in this area of data science and of big data. And this is perfect for me. Being a statistician, I am a data scientist, which means I have the sexiest job of the 21st century. I'm going to hold on to that one. But my field, I will just share a little from my field. My field has thought about big data, data science, and the role that statistics and statistical thinking play in these problem sets for a very long time, going back to H.G. Wells, saying that statistical thinking will one day be as necessary for efficient citizenship as the ability to read and write. And that time has come. Other leaders in my field have talked about uncertainty, supporting strategic decisions, and unraveling the mysteries of social behavior, social phenomena. So I'm thrilled that now I get to lead a lab that will be in the center of trying to do these things. Now, we can learn from other fields that have dealt with big data and team science. And the example that is pretty classical is the field of astronomy in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. So just for fun, I'm going to walk you through this. And in fact, my own field of statistics, the whole area of astrostatistics, which is one of the most successful interdisciplinary segments of my field, has grown out of these partnerships and team science that went into the Sloan Digital Survey. So what the Sloan Digital Survey did is that this telescope was built, and over a period of years, it watched the night sky over and over and over again, and it recorded all of this data. And then out of this data, researchers and teams were able to extract spectra and other types of phenomena and discover things that they didn't know existed, not the least of which it was focused at trying to look for supernovas, and they discovered a lot more supernovas than anyone ever thought existed, plus many, many other things. But the thing I find so fascinating about the Sloan Digital Night Survey in this huge data collection activity that took place is that the majority of the research published from this data has been by teams and researchers that actually were not involved in the design of the telescope and actually were not involved in the data collection, but they simply were accessing this wonderful repository of data. And that's some lesson to be learned. Another lesson to be learned from this is that as we build new data acquisition systems, so for example, the next generation synoptic telescope, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, which should launch in a few years, it's being designed right now. But at the table to design that telescope are astronomers, our physicists, our statisticians, our engineers. And what they're focusing on in part, my field is focusing on, is that data acquisition and capture of the data. Because once this telescope launches, and we're 10 years from now, we don't know what statistical methods, what analytics we're going to want to do with this data. So we have to be sure that the acquisition system is robust enough to not limit what we might be able to do with the data, not limit the way the data is collected. That's a huge game changer in science, to bring such teams together and to really worry about future use of the data as opposed to right now. And this, I believe, needs to be alive and well in studying social phenomena. Now, astronomy is not the only field that has been developing data acquisition. This is just another example. This is the National Environmental Observatory Network, or is it environmental or is it ecological? One of those two, maybe it's both. But this is an NSF-funded project that has developed a network of sensors that are quite heterogeneous, doing all kinds of data collection on the environment. Scientists now coming together using it, some that have been involved in the sensor development, some that haven't, but simply having access to that data helps address new problems. Other communities, Department of Defense, Zenatural, has for a very long time developed major data acquisition systems that teach us a lot about our world and about the situational awareness that we live in. Well, what about the social sciences? I argue it's time that we consider what this sort of big data paradigm means in social sciences. We know that there's great capability to collect a lot of data. You hear this all over the place, you know, social media, scraping the web, things like Arlington County is trying to do with laying a fiber optic ring around the county that'll just be kind of like the Hoover vacuum of all the data running through the county. The technology is there to collect this information. So if I go back to the Sloan Digital Sky example and think of all this social data in that way, and we're watching it synoptically, day after day, day after day, what slice through that data would I want to grab to answer some important social science problem? Now's the time to think about these things. This is a shift from what social sciences has done in the past. In the past, we've been driven by using very carefully designed surveys and experiments to help us understand and study our problems and our questions using the scientific method in its most rigorous way. We've focused on trying to minimize data collection because it's costly, and to come up with great statistical techniques to leverage as much data, much information out of as little data as possible. Well, this is all flipping now. Now we have massive amounts of data floating at us. However, that massive amount of data has not been carefully or statistically or scientifically designed in its collects necessarily. And that's what we call the organic flows of information. And so this brings me back to just thinking for a second about and trying to ground my thinking a little bit in what is a data acquisition system. So if I come out of the physical sciences world and think about what is a data acquisition system, a data acquisition system has sensors, frequently heterogeneous sensors, networked in some way, and that's more figuratively than physically, perhaps. There's the data flows, it's stored, it's able to be retrieved. I would say in this particular case, the Sloan Night Telescope is actually a very simple data acquisition system compared to many others. They wouldn't have thought that at the time, but in today's language it is. You want to do analytics on this data. You want to build up evidence to support decisions and decisions that you can take actions on. That's the fundamental building blocks of a data acquisition system. But it's important to know that this is a nonlinear interactive process. We don't just step 1, 2, 3, 4. We bounce all over this process. We design new sensors. We put them together in different kinds of networks, different kinds of retrieval. Depends on what the problem is that we're looking at. But in all cases, we're really trying to be driven towards understanding situational awareness. Situational awareness is a term that we tend to associate with defense and security, but it's a beautiful term that we should associate with our research on social behavior. We're really trying to understand what is the situational awareness of the community, of the environment, of the health status, and that's what data acquisition systems are designed to try to help us do. So today, I would argue that current social science data acquisition system is based on big data, but big data of the sort that the Federal Statistical Enterprise collects, and that's to include places like NOAA, USGS, CDC. That's the set of information that most of our social behavioral sciences research has been grounded in and is grounded in. And it's beautiful. We don't want to throw that away. However, today, there's all kinds of other data that's getting added to this, or at least is available. And it's a bit interesting that when I talk to my colleagues across the federated federal statistical system, Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Health Statistics, Education Statistics, and I ask them, how are you going to use some of this other data that's floating around out there? How are you going to add that to integrate that with this federally collected data to either improve or to better understand the federal statistics? And sometimes I just want to sort of circle the wagons and say we're not going to do that. That's not going to be allowed. But the point is it's happening, and they're actually loosening those wagons up and are thinking about how to embrace this. Motivated by things like the MIT Billion Prices Project. So this particular project, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a project that students put together at MIT simply by doing different kinds of web scraping, looking at the queries that people were making, and they actually came up with ways to estimate consumer price indices without federal data that is stepping right along and mirroring the federal estimates. Now, I'm not saying throw away the federal estimates or the federal data, but the point is there's other data out there that could be useful. And then we've got people that are writing about how this big data revolution will transform how we live, work, and think. And these authors from The Economist, you know, these are good people. They're really motivating the fact that we need to pay attention to this. Okay, with that in mind, perhaps the new view for a data acquisition system for social sciences should be one that is much more comprehensive, that is going to pull together social demographic information, economic information, climate change, natural disasters, and all sorts of other unanticipated changes. In other words, to expand that thinking and to really try to figure out how are we going to pull in and capture data, put it together through analytics to gain the situational awareness of the social phenomena. and it has to be a much bigger picture than what we've done in the past. Okay, I've used some language pretty loosely here, so let me step back and define a couple things, because everybody talks about big data, right? So what do we mean by big data? Well, I can tell you what I mean by big data. I'm talking about data that's structured and unstructured. That means data that is design collections, the surveys that I talked about, only the size of these surveys and structured data are growing by leaps and bounds, where we might have had 1,000 or 10,000 observations. Now, if we start working with health claims data, for example, we've got 7.2 million observations to work with. Lots of variables for each observation as well. That's still structured. But then we have unstructured data, data that you might pull down through social media or other purposes, text, or maybe it's simply data that still comes to you in a flat file, but there was no particular statistically designed data collection that underpins it. That's part of what I mean by unstructured. And that's so design collections, and the lion's share of what we're seeing in the big data space right now today would be data that I would call observational data or convenience data. No one has designed it. It's just coming at us. It's truly observational data, and so we have to think about that. But at the end of the day, I don't really care what we call it. I just care how we use it. So that's the end of my effort while I'm at Virginia Tech in defining big data. I talked about statistics, and I said that this lab is going to unite statistical science and computational social science. And why statistics? We will leverage the fabulous computational sciences, the computer science, the mathematics that all live around us here at Virginia Tech, and we will leverage our good colleagues in statistics. But statistics brings something really important to the table. So here we have all this observational data just coming at us, scraping it off the web, Twitter feeds flowing in that we're trying to analyze. Well, and there are a lot of people out there that say, with all this big data, we can find new correlations. How many of you studied correlation in your classes? And the famous example of correlating, bubblegum sales to education level or something. I don't know, those crazy examples that we have, right? They have nothing to do with each other. They just seem to be moving in the same direction. That doesn't mean causation. We really want to move past correlation, past simply finding signals, to understanding what those signals mean. What is the causation? Can I get to prediction? Well, in my field, there are some fundamental building blocks to get you there. One is the concept of replication. The second has to do with reproducibility. Those are actually related. And then finally, representativeness. If I have data, there is some underlying population. That population could be people, could be objects, could be other things. I'm using that generically. There's some underlying population that that data represents, that is representative of. I'm going to do something with that data, and I'm going to make my inference, I'm going to draw my conclusions and put them back on that population that they represent. So if I have no idea who this data represents, I'm in a little bit of trouble. That doesn't keep reporters from reporting it, though. The next thing that I've commented on is computational social science. And that will be a major force in the lab. It already has begun with some economists that have joined the lab. And by this, I mean truly card-carrying social scientists that are interested in and do quantitative analyses, develop quantitative methods at scale with massive data. So not just the computational social scientists that build massive agent-based models, but those that also inform those models through quantitative methods with data at scale. So that's who we're going to, that's who's going to be up on the third floor. All right. Having said all that, there's troubles in paradise here. And so let me give you an example which will drive home the importance of ensuring that you have really good statistical and social science practice and research behind what you're doing. So we're right now working a problem where we were very excited because we had 4 great data sources. And the sources are fairly large. And this is data coming from New Delhi, India, where we actually have data coming from design surveys where a company did some on-the-ground surveying. The data itself is trying to get at understanding in quasi-real time how people would behave, what actions they would take if a flu epidemic broke out, or while the flu epidemic is breaking out. Would they keep their children home? Would they vaccinate their children? What would they do? So the idea was, can we collect data and try to integrate it together to understand what the behaviors would be of the different demographic components of this population? So we had a company that did some design survey. We used Amazon Turk and Jana.com. These are more participatory tools, participatory data collection tools, sort of like citizen science type tools, weren't necessarily designed to be used in the way we thought we would try to use it. And then, of course, we also have census data, which is going to be an important player in trying to help us tie some of this down. So it's great. We have all this data. Let's just throw it all together and look at what we can learn. Well, here's the problem. So in this particular picture, the different colors represent the different data sources. Now, the data was collected in New Delhi across the same population, we thought, we hoped. But what you see right away is that there's a dramatic difference in what each of these sources come up with for household size. A dramatic difference for what they're coming up with for education. If these data were coming from the same population, if they were, the representativeness of them was the same underlying population, these distributions should look very similar, right? And then I could easily combine the data. But they're very dissimilar. But the good news is, we actually have things we can do. So what you need to do is you need to become a little bit of a data sleuth, do some forensics on this to try to understand why are these data coming up differently. And in this particular set of plots, what I'm showing you is the age distribution that compares one of the data sources to the New Delhi census. Because we would sort of hope that the New Delhi census was reasonably representative, but I will admit it's a 2001 census. A lot has happened since 2001 in this part of the country, part of the world. But the one thing you notice right away, very specifically, is you're getting very different age demographics. So now I'm beginning to understand what slice through my population might this data represent, and I have well-defined methods and statistics that can help me develop weights and reweighting schemes to figure out how to knit some of this together. So my point of showing you this example is that when you're working with big data, it's not simply to grab it all in and start building correlations. You really have to step back and understand the fundamental structure of the data. All right. Enough of the sermon on be careful. But we will be digging into these and developing new theories and methods for handling these types of problems. I want to talk to you about one of our thrust areas. We will have several thrust areas in the lab, but the one that we've been talking about a lot, particularly with our partners here in Arlington County, is the area of metropolitan analytics. And I am not going to stand here and say that we're the first ones to ever think about this. There are many cities around the world, and here's just a subset of them, that have been starting to develop some well-defined programs in metropolitan analytics. In the United States, there are several cities that are already making a massive amount of their data available to the public, to researchers, to the public, to everyone through open data sources, where now you can see the data on, not just on Yelp, but you can see the data on all the health reports for restaurants, or you can see data on the traffic or the education of the city. Or the recent article in the New York Times was how you can see the data in terms of who's throwing their grease down the sewers and clogging the drains. Anyway, this data is being made publicly available. The city data, Chicago, in New York, in San Francisco, and there are more, but these are some of the most prominent examples that are being written about right now. Well, okay, so I want to know if the restaurant's healthy that I might go to, but that can't be the main reason that this data is out there. the data is being put out there because you can actually then begin to use it to understand some important problems about your metropolitan area, about your city. So for example, there's data about the infrastructure. Now, data about the infrastructure, the conditions, the operations, that's actually really been there for a very long time. And we've studied transportation and different types. We have a beautiful transportation institute here at Tech, and others that have studied infrastructure modeling for almost 2 decades now. So that's not particularly new, but it's there. We can instrument the city and we can get that information. What becomes a little bit more new is we also now are able to collect and instrument our cities and collect all sorts of information about the environment, about air pollution, meteorology, the noise, all of these sorts of things. And even beyond that, we are also now able to add to that data and information about the people, their relationships, their locations, their education, what they buy, where they live, how they communicate. All of this information now is available. And it's this type of information that these cities are pushing out there in their open formats, which is very exciting to see. Let me give you 2 examples. I'm going to give you 2 examples that I think are pretty powerful as to why this should happen, why cities should do this, and then why we as researchers should get involved and partner with them on trying to study some social problems. So this first example comes from some colleagues in Houston. And what they did is that they actually took data from 2004 to 2011, all of the hourly air pollution data, ozone and ambient air pollution data, and they coupled that with the emergency medical services locations of individuals who were having out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And the study that they did was really quite clean in terms of disambiguating what the incident was. Now, this is important because 90% of individuals die that have out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Huge. 300,000 people a year in this country die of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So the question was there some relationship between air pollution and these incidents of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest? This is just a map of the 12,000 EMS calls that were in the data. And what the analysis found by putting this together, this is a geospatial statistical analysis with all the uncertainties quantified in the appropriate way. What they found, and what's important here, is this is sort of the demographic sets here. And if you are on this side of 1, that's not good. Your incident is higher when ozone or the pollution particulates are higher. They found a 4.4% increase in out-of-hospital cardiac incidents for every 20 parts per billion increase in pollution. It was a huge result. And it's a huge result because there's actually a solution to make the population healthier. If you know the ozone is high, stay inside, and you'll be fine. So if the city begins to think about how to develop real-time monitoring and alarming for high levels of ozone, it will save lives. And that's the next what they're trying to do. Another example coming from our colleagues in San Francisco, what they did, and if you remember, San Francisco is one of the cities that has the open data, so you can actually go get this data. What they did is that they were very concerned about the noise in the city, feeling that it was unsafe, particularly if it's above 55 decibels. So they took the data on traffic volumes, industrial activity, took into account night-day differences, and the 3D topology of the buildings to build a model of the noise in the city. And the map is what you see. It's an artifact, by the way. This is just an artifact of the drawing. But you can see what the result is. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that this particular study, to do this, they used physical and engineering models to convert traffic volume to noise. Similarly, to convert industrial activity to noise. This study, if you can see it, is 2008. Well, today, they're actually putting sensors in the city for noise to do direct measurements of noise. I mean, that's where we're going with this, is being able to better instrument the city to get better measurements. This particular analysis actually led to new policies in the city with regard to building, new construction. New construction in certain areas had to have more soundproofing in the buildings. It also led to different policies across the city for different types of land use, for example, parks and playgrounds and things like that. So San Francisco is using these sorts of analyses to drive their policy management, as are some other cities. So if I haven't convinced you, I'll convince you now that we can fully instrument our cities. And this instrumenting our cities is both the socioeconomic data as well as physical data. And I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about what might these data flows be and what might the data rates look like, because it's not actually as overwhelming as you think. As soon as we start talking about watching our city, issues of privacy come up really strong. And I will appreciate it if you simply let me table privacy for a moment. I will come back to it. It's actually one of my own areas of research. But let's just talk about, I'm a data wildcat, so let's just talk about the data to start with. So the data flows. We have the societal flows, which are like administrative records and surveys, some of the more traditional things that we've collected for a long time to try to socially study things. On the transaction side, your cards when you go to your the grocery card, what is it called? Your customer card or your discount card, whatever the card is called, that that gets scanned, and so now we know everything you're buying. They don't really care that you're buying it. They're just caring, are you buying Pop-Tarts when you buy beer? Because if so, they're going to put those two displays together. But anyway, that transactional data, which tells us about patterns and communication, personal data, psychological data, health data, operational data. But this physical data is sort of the new kind of cool thing that gets my physics friends really excited. I have a great physics colleague who's the director of the Center for Urban Science and Programs in New York City, this enterprise that Bloomberg stood up with NYU. And he's so excited because he gets to put instruments on tall buildings. And I'll show you a few of his pictures. But the neat thing about this is this physical in situ sensing, we don't have to build new technology. The technology exists. We just need to place it in different places and let it observe our cities. And that can be optical and infrared imagery, RF and magnetic, meteorological, seismic, acoustic, all sorts of things that we can actually do today with current technology, but just use it for different purposes. Again, you're letting me table privacy. This is sort of a cute picture from the Wall Street Journal that kind of gives you a sense, and this is in New York, there's a lot of stuff collecting data. Now, this data collection hasn't really been developed to be used to study social phenomena, but it's being collected, and we might be able to use it in that particular way. There's also this whole space of participatory sensing, where crowdsourcing, this sort of thing, citizen science, people are just volunteering their time and volunteering information. This is called Foursquare, which is an app you can have on your phone, and people just say, oh, I'm at this cool restaurant right now. And this is 5 o'clock and then 6 o'clock in Manhattan, and what you're seeing is an influx of people coming into the restaurant district in Manhattan just off of this particular app. So this whole participatory crowdsourcing type of way to collect data, it's cool that a lot of data is flown in. However, it presents tremendous challenges on how do we actually use it statistically and integrate it in with other things, as in the earlier example that I showed you. Then finally, some data rates. And this is sort of a back-of-the-envelope calculation with a couple physics colleagues, is that if we have 3 million people within a 10-kilometer radius, that means they live in about 1 million households. They have about 500,000 vehicles. And the end of the story is that over the course of the year, collecting all kinds of collects on these people, it would be about 600 terabytes of data. I mean, that's not that much anymore. We can process that. And the cost is less than 100K. It might be less than 50K now from when the slide was first built. So it's not that much. I mean, we can use this stuff if we can figure out how to knit it together. All right, so we talked a little bit about these physical sensing. And here's a picture of what you would see looking south from the Empire State Building in New York. And in fact, we had some time-lapse photography, just an off-the-shelf camera looking, watching over the course of the night, the lights twinkle on and off. And then we were able to actually use the same astrostatistical methods of clustering and spectrum development. And you do that, and all of a sudden, we began to see when the nightly news came on. We began to be able to match it geographically up to cleaning crews coming in and out of buildings, and a lot of interesting things. Now, I would show you those results, except for we also hit just a privacy right straight in a bad way with that particular analysis, because we could also identify windows and buildings and all of this sort of stuff. So we have to worry about that. But the point is, it's really kind of cool that you can apply the techniques from one area into this other using these same sensing mechanisms. Now, another problem, and some of you here keep hearing me talk about, well, what if we could, take infrared pictures and look at energy use or look at the energy efficiency of our buildings? And they're doing that right now in New York. And here's a picture again from Manhattan. And in this particular case, this study went through an IRB, and they're not getting hit with the same kinds of privacy issues because they're just looking at buildings overall. And what you can see are areas where there's more energy, or it's warmer, more energy loss. Well, it turns out this particular building, there's a computing center that's generating a lot of that. What if we could figure out how to tie together this really detailed energy metering with these infrared pictures? Can we develop these pictures as a surrogate for the meters? These are quick and dirty measurements. The metering is lots of data, very expensive to put in, but if we could put these things together, we may be able then to use some infrared imagery across our city to determine which buildings really need some renovation. Where and how should we prioritize different changes that we might make to reach better energy efficiency? Can I use these sorts of images to know floor by floor what's going on, which I may not have out of the other kinds of metering? And then some of our colleagues at VBI would like to know, can I use these kinds of images to understand how people mix within buildings? Do we see the heat maps change? But we can start to think about these problems with this fun sort of information. Well, I promised you I'd come back to privacy, and privacy has been an area of my own research for more than 20 years. And my work in privacy grew out of problems of the federal statistical agencies trying to promise and maintain the protection of your data to have the best quality information to inform the country on its national statistics. Yet at the same time trying to get data out there for researchers to use, microdata out there. Well, in this space of big data, the whole conversation about privacy is changing. And it's not just changing in the Western world, it's changing around the world. A lot of the conversation is being led by the World Economic Forum, and for the following reason. Yesterday, when we defined personal data, we defined it as those binary, those numbers, those digits that represented your response to the information you provided. Today, that definition has changed. Personal data is contextual and dependent on social norms. It's not just on some survey that you responded to. The second thing is, in the past, we signed informed consent, and we didn't really think too much about it. Sure, you can have my data. I'll answer this, or, it's census. I have to answer it. So, okay, you're going to protect it, and I'm going to give you that consent. Well, but today people really understand data a lot better, and they're really engaged in understanding how it's created, how it's going to be used. People worry about that. The most important change is that the policy framework of the past, or well, I shouldn't say the past, it's the policy framework that still is in existence today, focuses on minimizing risk to the individual, minimizing the risk of you being identified through some data release or analysis release. Well, there's a lot of discussion saying that that needs to change, that the policy needs to focus on balancing protection with innovation and economic growth. And you hear this conversation a lot when it comes to health data, is that your electronic health record that you, the patient, owns, you want that protected. You want some privacy on that. But on the other hand, combining a lot of this data might lead to a better understanding of the progression of a disease, the personalization of medicine, and to public health. So how do we balance these? We need to start to think about how to balance these issues. In this country, very specifically, there's been a lot of conversation surrounding e-commerce and surrounding industry. Every time you buy something, your information goes out. You know, what do the companies do with this information? And sort of the consumer bill of rights, if you will, that's being discussed and trying to be developed, it's in its nascent stage. Right now, it pretty much says, industry, do the right thing. Sort of where we are. But at least things are moving and the conversation is moving. Now, for years, when we've thought about privacy and the protection of data, we thought about it in the context of a picture like this, that we know that as we go from the individual or the resident and aggregate up to the neighborhood or the country, that the anonymity goes down. It's really difficult. If I have data aggregated across the neighborhood, it's very difficult for me to perhaps identify individuals in the neighborhood. So anonymity goes up. On the other hand, when I come across this scale, the utility of my data may go down. And the volume and the stratification, all that goes down. And we have volumes of publications that have developed metrics for this axis, a metric that is looking at the risk to the individual through different levels of data release using different methods and different kinds of data. I've published some of those papers. Today, we don't know what to put on that vertical axis, and in fact, this is probably not a high enough dimensional picture of the problem anymore, particularly if we're going to balance innovation and economic growth with personal risk of disclosure of information. We need to think about this differently. So there's a new set of research that's evolving in this particular space. There's a few other thoughts that there are many of us who've worked on privacy, like I said, for 2 decades. We grew up in a different world than young people today. So a lot of people are questioning, will people today more voluntarily give up their data if they think there's a social benefit? I used to have this as a statement instead of a question and got challenged every time. Are there different norms across generations? Are younger people more willing to let the world have their data, for example? They seem to be more willing to post and do a lot of things on social media, but does that mean that it's okay to grab that data and use it? There are a lot of technical fixes that exist in multi-level classification that could be applied in the privacy space. If we have finer-grained representation of information, maybe not a whole record, but the atomic parts of a record, and protect those atomic parts as opposed to having to protect the corpus as a unit, maybe there's more we can do. We know how to handle things like that from other domains. But in the end, this data's out there. People are grabbing this data. People can grab this data. There's not much that you can keep that private, and people will do things with this data. So I think we should be at the forefront of doing it right and figuring out how to use it. And that brings me to my conclusions, that I think we really need to think about this space of social and decision analytics and the ability to use massive amounts of information, building really good statistics and social science methods with this data, answering important questions. We need to take a 10-year strategy, at least in thinking about this. We're not going to solve these problems overnight, but we can solve them. We will be able to solve them. We need to think about what is the government responsible for. Early on, I talked to you about the MIT Billion Prices Project, where we are able to create, through non-federally collected information, some pretty good estimates of federal statistics. Well, should the government just relinquish all of that to the outside world? I think that's probably not the right answer, but where's that mix? What should the government or governments be responsible for? What are the partnerships and alliances that we need to make between government, academia, and industry, and around the world? This is not just a US-centric problem. I think that many of us believe that the transparency with what we do is going to be critical. The public has to gain trust in how this data is used and how it's put together to inform social policy and to build evidence used in many different domains. So that means that there has to be transparency and sharing of the information. The Sloan Digital Telescope is a great example. Complete transparency, complete sharing, and just worlds of wonderful achievements that were results that were created as a result of that. We need to be able to really worry about the reuse and reproducibility of the data, particularly in the space of research. People have got to be able to reproduce results to build confidence in what we're finding and what we're learning and what we're attributing things to. And then finally, I think that we really need to be motivated by what I like to call common good questions. If we can get some really common good questions out there, gain traction on them. The out-of-hospital cardiac attacks, to me, is a great example there. If we can get those questions out, again, people will have confidence that this is a good thing to do, and it will allow us to build more and build on more data sources. And then finally, if I come back to Virginia Tech, one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here is that, Virginia Tech really had a vision out there that trying to build the capability of the lab we're building would be central to this strategy and will bring Virginia Tech central in this problem domain of really, at scale, studying the social condition. So with that, oh, I've got one more. Hold on. My favorite picture of the early census, that things seems to stay the same. And if you were listening closely, you noticed a holiday theme throughout my talk of past, present, and future. So thank you for your attention.
Sallie, great talk. We have several minutes for questions.
So I have kind of a specific question about the cardiac study. Did they know where people were when they were having these heart attacks?
Yes, that picture, the map that I showed you.
Did they know whether they were outside or inside?
They did.
And does that correlate with how long they've been outside?
Yes, and there's a 3-hour window that makes a difference in all of this. But yes, if they were outside within a 3-hour time frame of when they had the, if there's a 3-hour time frame that if they were outside, that led to the incident. If they were outside 4 hours before, it didn't. So that was, yes, they knew if they were outside, and there's a very specific time interval.
So my second question is, did they use this evidence to kind of drive changes in how pollution is generated in Houston? I mean, anybody kind of think that this is a bigger problem, people going outside versus not going outside?
That's a great question. So in case everybody didn't hear the question, did they use this study to help drive how pollution is generated, or perhaps how pollution could be mitigated in Houston? So the study itself just came out in the spring of 2013, so it's very new. And there's also been a political change in the mayoral position in Houston. The first mayor who funded the study was really gung-ho to try to develop the real-time sensor and to use this to help industry pay more attention to what they can do to mitigate some of the pollution. Current mayor, not clear that she's as much interested in that. But the thing that's wonderful about this is, as scientists, we don't have to get in that debate. We just get to do the research and the analysis and put the evidence out there and let the people who can make those policy decisions and make those policy changes, they have it, and they can choose to use it how they would like. But it's out there, so she can't ignore it. So that's what's kind of cool. Same thing with like the noise example in San Francisco. The modeling itself was not quite as sophisticated as the cardiac cardiac attack analysis. But it really put evidence out there to San Francisco that there are areas where we have issues with noise. And it puts it out there so that the policymakers actually, and the people, you know, can begin to argue about this evidence. What does it mean? How do I want to use it? But at least I have it.
I think it's a very interesting kind of social problem, because we have all these problems that society faces where there is abundant evidence that people just ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change, evolution, and so how do we sort of make that change in society that they actually pay attention to these things where there is evidence?
Well, I think how we try to make those changes is that we try to structure the analyses properly, that they're done in such a way that they can be replicated and reproduced. I mean, in climate change, that's been part of our problem until recently. A lot of that just simply was not being reproduced. The data was not being made available and reused so that people could study that. It is now. But that's what I think that's what we need to do. And we need to push back on people that will just do wildly wrong things. Just because I have a lot of data, I'm going to correlate it and get these, signals, and I'm going to say they mean something. We need to kind of push back on that and try to be sure that we can justify what signals we find and what they mean, and really drive towards causation.
Hi. In your opinion, the massive data being collected by NSA, do you think that could be used for societal benefit other than just national security, and if so, how?
Oh, okay, so the question is, the massive data that NSA collects, could it be used for societal benefit, not just for defense and intelligence? Yes, I think it can, and I think there are examples for which that has already happened. You may or may not be aware of the Medea project that started, Steph, help me out. Stephanie Shipp, my deputy. It started in about 2000, maybe, 2000-ish time frame, and it was around the issue of climate change. And so what happened is that NSA cleared in a collection of really good climate scientists who worked hand in hand with people within NSA with the data collects that they had, because there was some ground truth that they had that wasn't readily available to anyone else. They were able to validate some of their models and theories. And that particular program over the years has led to the declassification of a lot of data that has really moved forward the climate change field. I think that in the case right now within NSA data collects, I mean, open intelligence is one of their new data collects, one of their new lines of business. Well, that's open data, data that we all access and generate. And I think there's a two-way street here, that we can help them understand what some of this open information can be used for. Can you separate fact from fiction when you're using this sort of thing? So I think it is a two-way street of what can happen.
Could you elaborate on, so that actually led in to something I was thinking about. When you are using this unstructured data or data that's coming from sources you don't control the sensors, or you don't control the methodology you're collecting the data. How do you detect false data or bad data in using those sources? That seems to me a major.
Right. So that's where you have to reach to other data sources, not just those observational ones, that you can try to anchor it. I mean, we do have a lot of very well-designed federal data collection going on, for example, about people. So you try to figure out, where can I begin to anchor this to understand what that representativeness is.
This is why we can't just throw it over the fence.
Right. And this is not a completely new problem in statistics and in social sciences for forever. We've dealt with observational data and convenience samples, usually at a much smaller scale, trying to figure out, what can I learn from this? Can I do different kinds of matching and pairing to understand treatment response in different ways? Now, the other thing that you can do, and this is sort of the next phase that we're going to go to with this example where I told you about the 4 data sources. One of the things that's really cool is that we get to design the next set of data collects there. Well, we can learn from other areas. In sort of environmental sciences, for years, we've used quick and dirty measurement techniques to try to drive expensive measurements. So, for example, I happened to work on this problem when we were trying to find what was the environmental condition due to the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos National Lab. You know, where might there have been still radiological spills? You know, what's the environmental condition of the different soils and what have you there? Well, it's very expensive to do drilling and collecting data. So what did we do? It's very cheap to have alpha and beta counters and to go out and collect cheap and quick and dirty data and let that drive where you're going to do your expensive data collects. You can think of this problem a little bit like that. I've got this quick and dirty data flowing out there, all this massive stuff that I can scrape. Well, can I use that to drive other data collects, an on-the-ground survey that's going to help me anchor my use of this data? So that's some of our thoughts. But we're going to be, you know, ask me back in a year. Well, Nick.
I don't know if I've got this quite framed as a question, but as data has become more of a commodity, there's
An asset class.
a real asset, and you know, it seems to me in some ways we're getting our butts kicked by Google and Amazon and others. They're the ones with so much of the data that we want. Even NSA realized that, and they had to tap into that to get the data. You know, have you thought about where is this heading? You know, is the public side no longer really at the forefront of what we can do with this kind of social data? Has it become such a valuable commercial asset that we have to be thinking of new ways to partner with companies?
We definitely have to think of new ways to partner with companies, and it's going to be challenging. It is challenging because there has to be some value add for them to share their data with us, for example. So we have to begin to work these things out. And the Googles and you know, Yahoos, and I think we have to be a little bit careful because they're really focused on the e-commerce side of things. That's only one slice of the kind of data and the kind of social behavior that's important. So we have to also keep that in mind. But we have to figure out these partnerships, and I'll tell you why I think that's the case. And this is from the researcher perspective. So right now we're trying to build a strategic partnership, or potentially build a strategic partnership with Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble is a consumer goods company, not an e-commerce company. They supply 2/3 of the consumer goods to the world. They're a company that has the ethos of manufacturing locally, which means they're all over the world, adhering to the different environmental policies and, you know, the material changes and all of these sorts of things. I want their data because they're in parts of the world and they know certain things and they're doing data collection not to study social phenomena perhaps, maybe consumer marketing, but they're in parts of the world with data and information that could be really valuable to inform the studies that we might want to do. So I understand why I want to do it. Now I need to convince them why they want to do it. And we're working on that strategy. I don't have it yet. But there has to be some value add to them. Otherwise, they won't partner.
One more, last one.
Especially when people put their data information online, maybe for some beneficial consideration. So there may be some subjective. So in that sense, how can we trust the data? How can we adjust or process the data to make that?
So the question is, how can we trust the data, particularly when people may put the data out there for their own reasons? You know, is there something subjective in what we have to do here? This is not a new problem. This has always been at the heart of any data collection. How do we trust the data? How do we know that the data has quality? What do we go through to identify and determine the data quality? That's as true in the conduction of an agricultural field experiment. You know, how did they put the treatments on the field? You know, who did it? Did they do the randomization the way that we said that they were supposed to? How was the data collected there? The problem and question that you just asked is as true there as it is now with this new social media. So for all the things that you've just said, you have to build frameworks that assess all of those questions to understand the data. Where did it come from? Why is it out there? When I put this data together and I look at this through all of my exploratory data analysis techniques, am I finding strange patterns and outliers? Why? So to be if you're going to be a data wildcat, you also have to be good at data forensics. So, but it's not a new problem. Every time you're dealing with data, even if it comes from an authoritative office, you have to ask the question, what is the quality of this data, and how do I know it's the quality that I think it is? And there's always subjectivity in there.
So now, it's a social hour.
Thank you.
Thank our speakers.
Thank you.